My parents sold my car to fund my sister's vacation, so I bought my own home and left them begging for my help. I'm a 24-year-old guy who's always been the responsible one in my family. The quiet kid who worked weekends, saved every rupee I could, and tried to keep everything from falling apart while my parents focused on my younger sister's every whim. She could ask for a new phone, a weekend trip, or even the latest gaming console, and somehow it was always approved without a second thought. Meanwhile, I was fixing her mistakes, paying the bills she didn't even notice, and silently shouldering responsibilities that no one acknowledged. I remember countless evenings sitting at the kitchen table, balancing household expenses on a battered notebook, while my sister laughed in the living room and my parents complimented her maturity or talent for things that barely deserved a word. I tried to tell myself it was fine, that loyalty, patience, and doing the right thing would earn me their respect eventually. I'd remind myself that being responsible wasn't a punishment, it was a reflection of who I was, but the frustration built quietly, like water filling a glass that never emptied. Every compliment my sister received, every thank you they gave her, felt like a knife twisting in my chest. I started dreaming in silence, of leaving, of a life where my efforts mattered, of finally breaking free from the invisible chains of obligation. I pictured saving enough to invest, to secure a future that didn't depend on their approval, where I could be proud without needing their validation. The house always smelled faintly of my mom's lemon cleaner, and the constant hum of the refrigerator became the soundtrack of my unacknowledged labor. Evenings smelled like burnt toast or overcooked rice, yet I silently cleaned, cooked, and sorted bills, while the rest of the family carried on as if my existence was optional. And in those quiet moments, as I stared at the ceiling, calculating how long it would take me to truly be free, I felt something shift, a mix of anger, hope, and determination that I couldn't yet put into words. But nothing could have prepared me for what happened the day they sold my car to fund my sister's vacation. Losing my car felt like losing the last piece of control I had over my own life. I remember waking up that morning to my dad's voice in the hallway, calm but with that unmistakable edge. "We sold your car for your sister's trip." I froze mid-bite of toast, the crumbs burning my tongue, my stomach twisting. "Wait, what? You sold it? Without even asking me?" I demanded, my voice tighter than I realized. My mom's eyes flicked toward me, and she said softly, almost rehearsed, "It's for the family, darling. She needs this trip, and it's not permanent. You can manage without it for a while." Manage without it? I had worked 2 part-time jobs just to afford that car, to feel some independence. And now it was gone, erased in an instant. I felt the frustration building like a storm in my chest, hot and uncontrollable. I imagined all the mornings I'd spent cleaning, refueling, maintaining that car, all the late nights juggling bills, and suddenly it seemed meaningless. My sister smirked from the living room, scrolling through vacation photos she hadn't even left yet, completely oblivious to the destruction she'd caused. "Thanks, guys," she said lightly, tossing me a casual smile. That was it. That one line hit me harder than anything before. Every ounce of patience I'd carried felt like it evaporated in that moment. The house felt smaller, oppressive, the walls closing in as if mocking me. I could hear the hum of the old fridge, smell the faint lemon cleaner, taste the bitterness of betrayal lingering on my tongue. I wanted to scream, to shake them into realizing how much they'd ignored me all these years. But instead, I sat down on the edge of my bed, staring at the floor, imagining the thousands of plans I had for my life, now paused or destroyed. And that's when a thought hit me, a dangerous, thrilling, terrifying thought. If they could take something I worked for so easily, Maybe it was time I stopped relying on them at all. Maybe the real freedom I craved wasn't borrowing approval. It was taking my life completely into my own hands. Little did I know, this was just the beginning, and the next move I made would change everything. After that day, I couldn't stop thinking about what had happened. Every time I walked past where my car used to sit in the driveway, I felt a mix of anger, disbelief, and humiliation. My parents acted like nothing had changed, like I was overreacting for wanting some independence. "It's just a car," my dad said one evening, leaning back in his chair, a casual smile plastered on his face. "You'll get another one someday." I wanted to scream, to throw something, but instead I gritted my teeth and nodded, because I knew any outburst would be dismissed, minimized, or worse, twisted against me. My sister bounced into the kitchen that night, backpack stuffed with travel brochures she'd been hoarding. "Can you believe it? They got me first-class tickets? Isn't that amazing?" she chirped. I felt a lump in my throat, a wave of resentment washing over me. "Amazing? For you," I said flatly, tasting the bitterness with every word. I saw the faint flash of guilt in her eyes, but it vanished as quickly as it came. They were all laughing about flight times and hotel choices, completely unaware, or uncaring, that I'd just lost something I'd worked for, something that meant independence, pride, and control. The smell of my old car, leather seats, faint scent of my aftershave, haunted me for days. I kept imagining it parked somewhere else, someone else driving it while I walked past, powerless. Nights became restless. I'd stare at the ceiling, the hum of the fridge, a cruel reminder of how small my life felt under their roof. I began scribbling plans in a notebook, side jobs, savings goals, timelines. Maybe I couldn't control their favoritism or my sister's entitlement, but I could control me, and that was the seed of rebellion, quiet but fierce. I didn't know it yet, but selling my car had triggered something I couldn't ignore anymore. The next time they thought I'd stay obedient, patient, and invisible, they'd be in for a shock. The thought made my hands tremble, and I realized, for the first time in years, I wanted more than just respect. I wanted freedom, and I was willing to fight for it. After that day, the house felt suffocating. Every conversation, every glance, every casual remark carried weight, like I was constantly being measured and found lacking. My parents continued treating my sister like a queen, praising her for grades, charm, even minor chores, while I remained invisible. "Can you make sure she has clean clothes for the trip?" my mom asked one morning, as if I'd been born to serve. I nodded quietly, teeth clenched, tasting the bitterness of obligation on my tongue. I felt trapped in a role I never asked for. The responsible son everyone leaned on. The invisible backbone of a family that saw me only when convenient. Nights became the hardest. I'd lie on my bed listening to the faint hum of the fridge, the occasional squeak of my sister's chair, the faint smell of burnt toast from breakfast lingering in the kitchen. I'd stare at the ceiling, calculating how much money I could save if I cut back on everything, wondering how long it would take me to finally move out and be free from this cycle. I felt my patience fraying, but I clung to it because that's all I knew. Loyalty, responsibility, enduring the unfairness. Still, the anger simmered beneath the surface, a quiet storm threatening to spill over. I began keeping a small notebook, jotting down budgets, side hustles, and escape plans. "One day," I whispered to myself while staring at the page, "I'm getting out of here, and they won't be able to control me anymore." I could almost see it. My own apartment, my own rules, my own space where respect wasn't optional. And yet, the house continued to weigh on me, suffocating, reminding me of my invisibility and my sister's smug, entitled face haunted every corner. I realized something important that night. If I didn't take action soon, I'd remain invisible forever. But taking that first step felt terrifying. I didn't know it yet, but what I was planning would ignite a chain of events that none of us could have imagined. From that point on, I threw myself into building a life I could control. Every spare hour was spent researching side jobs, investment strategies, and ways to finally cut the cord from a family that treated me like an afterthought. I remember the late nights in my tiny bedroom, the soft hum of my laptop blending with the distant sounds of my sister's laughter downstairs, plotting a future they couldn't touch. If I can make this work, I whispered to myself, tracing numbers on a notebook, I'll never have to depend on them again. The thrill of possibility coursed through me, stronger than the anger I had been holding on to for months. I started taking small risks, freelance gigs, odd jobs, anything that could increase my savings. Each success, no matter how minor, felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. I even felt a quiet satisfaction when my sister complained she couldn't borrow money from me anymore, though she didn't know it yet. My parents still didn't notice the shift. They continued to praise her for every little thing, blind to my growing independence. And maybe that was for the best. I didn't need them to see it. The smell of coffee at 2 a.m., the dim glow of my laptop, the scribbled plans on scattered papers. It all became a ritual. I imagined packing up, moving into a place where I was the one setting the rules, where no one could sell my car or dismiss my hard work ever again. I could almost taste the freedom, crisp and electric, like the first morning in a space that was truly mine. But with every plan I made, a part of me still worried. What if they tried to stop me? What if the cycle of favoritism and entitlement chased me wherever I went? That fear was always there, like a shadow, reminding me that leaving wasn't going to be easy. And then, one afternoon, I stumbled onto something that changed everything. Something that made me realize my sister's entitlement ran deeper than I ever imagined. It was a lazy Saturday when I overheard my sister on the phone, laughing as she bragged to her friends. "Honestly, I don't even need to work," she said, tossing her hair over her shoulder. "They buy everything for me, and honestly, it's kind of fun." I froze in the hallway, my chest tightening, my stomach twisting into knots. The words hit me like a punch I didn't see coming. She didn't just expect handouts, she relished them, treating my sacrifices, my hard work, like a joke. I backed into my room and shut the door softly, the familiar hum of the fridge in the kitchen now sounding like a cruel mockery. I felt something shift inside me, a dangerous, thrilling, terrifying mix of anger and clarity. For years I had tried to be patient, loyal, obedient, hoping my parents' approval would eventually come, believing I was doing the right thing. But here was proof my efforts were meaningless. Not only did my sister exploit my sacrifices, but my parents had encouraged it all along. Later that night, I confronted her. "Do you even realize what you just said?" I demanded, voice trembling but firm. She laughed, brushing off my anger. "Relax, I was joking. Don't be so dramatic." My blood boiled. How could she not see? How could she not care? The house felt smaller, oppressive, every corner, reminding me that I had been invisible my entire life. I sank onto my bed, staring at the ceiling, feeling that mix of betrayal and motivation surge stronger than ever. If my parents and sister could dismiss me so casually, then I had to stop asking for their recognition. I had to create a life that couldn't be touched, a life where respect was mandatory, not optional. And in that moment, a plan began forming, a plan that was equal parts rebellion, liberation, and revenge. They had no idea how soon everything was about to change. and I could barely contain the thrill of it. For a few days after that confrontation, I felt broken, like everything I had done, every sacrifice I had made, had been for nothing. I questioned myself constantly. Was I overreacting? Was I just too sensitive? My parents continued their casual favoritism, praising my sister for trivial things, while I remained invisible, a ghost in my own home. One night, I found myself staring at the ceiling for hours, the faint smell of my mom's lemon cleaner filling the room, the hum of the fridge like a relentless reminder of my powerless position. I couldn't stop thinking about the car, the trips, the years of invisible labor. It hit me hard. I had been giving and giving, and it had never mattered. I was exhausted, resentful, and emotionally drained. I felt like I had hit my lowest point ever, the rock bottom moment where hope seemed distant, almost cruelly so. I could see myself slipping into a pattern of resentment, bitterness, and perpetual invisibility, all while my sister thrived off entitlement and my parents enabled it. Nights became restless. I tossed and turned, staring at the ceiling, feeling like my entire life was spinning out of my control. But somewhere in that darkness, a flicker of determination began to burn. If I didn't change my life, no one else would. I started sketching ideas on paper, timelines for moving out, savings goals, side hustles. Every small step felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. I could almost taste the freedom, crisp and thrilling, even as my chest tightened with fear. And that's when I realized this isn't just about leaving. This is about finally taking control, about creating a life where respect is mandatory, not optional. A life where no one could sell my car, dismiss my hard work, or treat me as invisible. And maybe, just maybe, one day they'd finally understand what they lost. Little did I know, the first step I was about to take would set everything in motion, and there was no turning back. From that night onward, I became obsessed with my plan. Every extra hour at work, every freelance gig I could find, every rupee I could save went straight into a mental and physical blueprint for freedom. I started tracking my expenses obsessively, listing out future apartment options, potential investments, everything that could finally give me control over my life. The hum of my laptop in the dead of night became a soundtrack to my rebellion, the dim light of my desk lamp casting long shadows on my wall as I scribbled numbers and projections in my notebook. I could smell the faint aroma of coffee lingering in my room, bitter and strong, fueling my determination. Each small success, an extra paycheck, a side hustle payout, felt like reclaiming a piece of myself they had tried to take for years. I began imagining my own space, my own rules, my own life where no one could belittle or ignore me. I could almost see it, the front door I'd lock at night, the walls that would only hear my voice, the freedom to make mistakes without judgment, the pride of earning everything with my own hands. It was intoxicating, and for the first time in years, hope coursed through me, stronger than resentment. I could feel it in my chest, a steady burn of excitement, tempered with fear. But mostly, it was thrilling. Of course, my family still didn't notice. My sister continued her entitlement, bragging to anyone who would listen, while my parents remained oblivious to the shift in me. And maybe that was for the best. The element of surprise was mine. One night, I sat at my desk, staring at my notes, imagining the moment I would finally walk out with my keys in hand, knowing I had built something they could never touch. The thought made my hands tremble, my heartbeat thunder in my ears. I knew the first step would be the hardest, and what I didn't yet realize was that this first step would ignite a chain reaction that none of us could have imagined. The day I signed the papers for my first home is etched into my memory like a victory I'd been dreaming of for years. I remember the scent of fresh paint and varnish as I stepped into the empty living room for the first time. Sunlight streaming through the wide windows, dust motes dancing in the golden light. For once, I felt like I truly belonged somewhere, like this space had been waiting just for me. The keys felt heavy in my hand, electric with possibility, each one a symbol of independence, control, and hard-earned freedom. I could furnish it however I wanted, paint the walls any color, set the rules, and no one could tell me otherwise. I spent hours walking through every room, imagining the life I would build here. In the kitchen, I pictured cooking without criticism or commentary. In the living room, I imagined friends laughing without judgment. And in the bedroom, I could finally rest without the shadow of expectation hanging over me. Even the hum of the refrigerator, once a reminder of invisible labor, now sounded like a steady heartbeat, celebrating my victory. I thought about my parents and sister, how small and insignificant their favoritism would feel against the walls I now owned. That night, I sat on the empty floor, the smell of varnish and fresh carpet still lingering, and let it sink in. I was finally free. No more invisible labor. No more being ignored. No more watching my sister thrive on entitlement while I suffered. Silently. I had built this life entirely on my own terms. The sense of pride and relief coursed through me, almost intoxicating in its intensity. But even as I celebrated in private, I knew the real test was yet to come. My parents and sister, accustomed to bending me to their whims, would eventually notice the shift. And when they did, I'd have to decide how much of this independence I wanted to reveal, or how much I was willing to use as leverage. And in that moment, a thrilling, dangerous thought crept in. They had no idea what was coming next. It didn't take long for them to notice. My parents called me in a panic one evening, my mom's voice quivering, my dad's usual calm replaced with tension. We need your help," my mom stammered. "There's some unexpected expenses, and we just don't have the funds." I leaned back in my chair, tasting the irony as a slow smile crept across my face. The same people who had sold my car, ignored my sacrifices, and enabled my sister's entitlement were now coming to me for help. I listened as they explained bills, repairs, and obligations that had suddenly become too much to handle. The quiet thrill in my chest was almost unbearable. I could hear my sister in the background, nervously asking, "Do you think he'll help? Should I call him?" Their panic and subtle desperation were intoxicating. Years of invisible labor had flipped the script. "I'm not saying no," I replied evenly, "but I have some conditions." Their faces went pale. "Conditions?" my dad repeated, disbelief cracking his voice. I laid it out carefully: repayment plans, boundaries, rules for respect, accountability measures, everything I had wished for but never received. I could feel the power shift with each word, my confidence rising like a tide they couldn't stop. The smell of my coffee mingled with the faint hum of the fridge as I calmly explained what help would look like, and what it wouldn't. For the first time, they realized my value wasn't optional, and I wasn't a perpetual backup. My sister tried her usual manipulation, guilt trips, and bargaining, but nothing worked. I could see the shock and frustration on her face as her entitlement collided with my independence. The house that once felt suffocating now seemed mine, a space where respect was mandatory, not optional. And I knew deep down, this was only the beginning. The final payoff was still to come, and they wouldn't know what hit them next. It didn't take long for them to notice. My parents called me in a panic one evening, my mom's voice quivering, my dad's usual calm replaced with tension. We need your help," my mom stammered. "There's some unexpected expenses, and we just don't have the funds." I leaned back in my chair, tasting the irony as a slow smile crept across my face. The same people who had sold my car, ignored my sacrifices, and enabled my sister's entitlement were now coming to me for help. I listened as they explained bills, repairs, and obligations that had suddenly become too much to handle. The quiet thrill in my chest was almost unbearable. I could hear my sister in the background, nervously asking, "Do you think he'll help? Should I call him?" Their panic and subtle desperation were intoxicating. Years of invisible labor had flipped the script. "I'm not saying no," I replied evenly, "but I have some conditions." Their faces went pale. "Conditions?" my dad repeated, disbelief cracking his voice. I laid it out carefully. Repayment plans, boundaries, rules for respect, accountability measures, everything I had wished for but never received. I could feel the power shift with each word, my confidence rising like a tide they couldn't stop. The smell of my coffee mingled with the faint hum of the fridge as I calmly explained what help would look like and what it wouldn't. For the first time, they realized my value wasn't optional, and I wasn't a perpetual backup. My sister tried her usual manipulation, guilt trips, and bargaining, but nothing worked. I could see the shock and frustration on her face as her entitlement collided with my independence. The house that once felt suffocating now seemed mine, a space where respect was mandatory, not optional. And I knew deep down, this was only the beginning. The final payoff was still to come, and they wouldn't know what hit them next. Sitting in my new home, I finally allowed myself to breathe. The house was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator, a sound that once reminded me of obligation, now a soothing background to my victory. My parents and sister had learned, painfully, that my respect and help were no longer automatic, that the boy they overlooked had grown into a man they couldn't manipulate. I poured a cup of coffee, its bitter aroma grounding me, and watched the sunlight spill across the polished floors, a reminder of how far I had come. Every detail of this place, every corner, every room, belonged to me because I had earned it, not because anyone had handed it over. My parents eventually approached me with humility, apologies soft and hesitant, asking for guidance on bills, repairs, and advice they'd once ignored. My sister, silent at first, tried to negotiate, guilt me, even guilt-trip my friends, but all of it fell flat. I realized the true power I held was not revenge. It was choice. I could help or withhold, guide or step back, on my terms. The house I built with my sweat, my sacrifices, and my late nights was more than a home. It was a fortress of independence and respect. I smiled to myself, savoring the irony. For years, they had sold my car, ignored my hard work, and enabled her entitlement. And now they came to me, begging for the guidance and support I had freely given, only on my conditions. There was no bitterness left, only satisfaction, empowerment, and closure. The boy who had been invisible, overlooked, and taken for granted had finally become untouchable, untethered, and unshakable. As I sank into my favorite chair, the morning sunlight warming my face, I realized the biggest victory wasn't the house, the rules, or the money. It was the knowledge that I could create a life where respect was mandatory, where loyalty was earned, and where I finally belonged entirely to myself. And for the first time, I felt completely free.